and welcome to the next episode of my podcast, I Do What I Want. I am Hollis Jo McCullum. We're just going to start calling myself Hollis, which is my first name, because it gets exhausting saying my whole name. I'm actually re-recording this episode. The first recording ended up having some serious microphone issues that were crazy annoying, so yeah, that's super fun. So this one's being posted a little late on Sunday. And this week, we are talking about Aram, one of the four main characters from my book, To Save a World. As many of you know who have listened, but if you're new, I'll just say this podcast is by an author, myself, Hollis Jo McCullum, and it's a podcast about my personal writing journey. I talk about my books, of course. I talk about just writing tips in general. Like last episode, I talked about my personal writing journey, and through self-publishing and what I've learned, and I still have a lot to learn. But that was last time. This time, since the sequel to Save a World is coming out in early next year, I'm hoping February, March, it will be ready to publish, so very excited about that. By early next year, I want to promote the first book. For those of you who haven't read it, it's available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, and frankly, anywhere they sell books, you can order it. You can pick up the ISBN number from Amazon, and any bookstore on the planet will order it for you if you request it. So go do that. Go support your local brick and mortar or pop on Amazon. It's available ebook and paperback, and it's a fantasy adventure book. And it's the prequel to what's coming out in early 2023. Besides that, the sequel is going to be called The Queen Witch, FYI. And besides that, I also have, I'm a Gemini, I say we a lot. The next book coming out from me that has nothing to do with this series is actually a completely different world. It's a Greco-Roman fantasy war story, so I'm very, very excited about that. It's going to the publisher next month. I cannot believe it. Almost done. And then hopefully it will be published and hitting Amazon and the other retailers and all that jazz in September sometime. So I, of course, will keep you posted on my upcoming projects. But for now, let's dive into Aram. For other character studies, I've already talked about Ethne and Darian. I'm doing the characters in the order that they appear. So the very first character you meet in the book is Ethne. And that's episode 2 of this podcast. And then the next character you meet is Darian, and that is episode 5 in the podcast. And then Aram is the next one. We're going to talk about him today. I will say, quick spoiler alert. This is not a spoiler alert about the plot of the book. So I promise I'm not spoiling anything about the plot of To Save a World. So I'm not telling you anything about the story, but there is a spoiler about the character of Aram, because some of the things I'm going to, when I get to talking about it, if you continue listening, the main thing, there's one big thing I talk about with Aram that has to be mentioned in a character study, but it is something that is revealed to readers kind of a little less than halfway through the book about his character. So if you don't want any spoilers at all, then please, check out other episodes of the podcast or go read To Save a World, learn about what it is, and then come on back and have a listen to this episode, find out more about Aram. But until then, consider this your official, if you don't want to know about one or two of his secrets that get revealed in the first book, again, no plot spoilers, no story spoilers, but a few character spoilers, then then maybe chill on this one. So, who is Aram? Aram is an elf. Pretty much all of the main characters in my book, To Save a World, are elves. I really don't have human main characters, just because I like elves. And physically speaking, Aram he's a little tall for an elf, and as I have stated previously, other elves are taller than humans on average. So the average height for an elf male would be, in my books anyway, would be between like 6 foot to 6'3". That's kind of your average range for a male elf. And Aram is maybe slightly taller than average. He may be around 6'4"-ish. And he's very athletic. He's a fighter. He's very, very good. He's a very strong, good fighter. So I imagine him as leanly muscled. He's agile. He's strong, that sort of thing. He's a pretty boy. He's your classic tall, dark, and handsome. I would say, honestly, if you know the singer Enrique Iglesias, this is how I imagine Aram physically. Beautiful tanned skin, dark brown eyes with long, thick lashes, and dark, he has black hair, and Aram's hair is kind of, it's a little longer. It's kind of a shaggy, tousled look that, of course, always seems to be perfect, even though he never does anything with it. Just runs his fingers through it and goes, because he doesn't care. But yeah, he's a pretty boy. So that's, when I was describing Aram, I actually, when I was writing, I thought Enrique Iglesias, and that's, yeah, so thanks, Enrique. Appreciate it. Love your music. And that is what he looks like physically. Aram is also a city elf. In the world of Rashan, which is the fantasy world that it's based in, there are two different types of elves. You have, and it's just cultural. Genetically, they're all elves. But culturally, you have tribal elves and you have city elves. Darien and Ethne are tribal elves. They live in a little bit more, they're based very loosely on the ancient Celts of the British Isles, and so they have a little bit more of a, just a kind of a, council of elders. They do all these sorts of things. They operate a little bit more on a tribal mentality. They have the spirit guide tattoos that they get, so on and so forth. If you want to know more about that, go listen to my episodes about Darien and Ethne. But Aram, he's a city elf, and city elves are, well, simply more metropolitan, very, very simply put. Imagine just any metropolitan city. In my mind, as an American, the first thing I think of is New York. I actually live outside of Atlanta, which is also very metropolitan, but I think of New York. So, think about that, but just put the fantasy aspect on it. You have a bunch of people who live, maybe even in apartments and things like that, and taller buildings and whatnot. And again, this is fantasy, not sci-fi, so don't think of it as having all the modern conveniences. But things are much more cramped. People live in much closer situations. There's not a lot of greenery in between. The city is in the middle of the forest, but the elves themselves, it's roadways. It's a lot, and that's where he grew up. And he has, so he, at least when he was a kid. Now here's the big spoiler about Aram, and that is that he's a werewolf. Aram was bitten when he was an adolescent. So as I've mentioned previously, the elves in this world live to be about 800 years old. So adolescence for an elf would be around 80 to 90 years old. So we'll say 85-ish, which I'm imagining would be, he was like 12 or 13 when he was bitten. And very traumatic. Up until that point, he had a super normal family life. Aram, he's got a little sister, he's got 2 parents. We don't get into it too much, but very normal, happy, generally good upbringing, no problems, well-adjusted kid. But then he got bit. and, awful. And his parents disowned him. So that's very traumatic. He basically, he turned into a monster. And his parents, just for the sake of their other child, for their own sake, they didn't see their son anymore. They saw a monster, and they disowned him and kicked him out into the world at essentially the age of 12 or 13, which is awful. And he had to fend for himself. Now, one of the things that makes him incredibly unique is that Aram didn't let the monster win, which in the world of Rashan, he is absolutely an anomaly. As far as the other characters in the book and everything else know, no one has ever heard of a werewolf that was able to not become this, a homicidal beast, essentially. And, the beast within, it's a terrible, terrible affliction that you just live with for the rest of your life. It cannot be reversed. And most people would just succumb to it because everyone tells you you're a monster. Everyone says it. But Aram is probably the strongest character in the entire book because, he is extremely physically capable as well. He's a great fighter. Being a werewolf, all of his senses, everything, guess what? That's heightened. He has better reflexes. He's faster. He's stronger. His sense of smell, hearing, taste, everything. It's elevated to a wolf-like level. So he's very, very formidable. But he also gives off this predatory air. Animals don't like him. they don't. He gets around horses or something. They sense danger, even if he's in his elf form, just walking around. Can't help what the pheromones are putting out, and the pheromones are putting out that this is a dangerous predator, and that's very unfortunate. But Aram, he from about the age of, we'll say, 80 to when you meet him in the book, he's, I'm going to say, roughly 130 years old, about the same age as the character Darian, which puts the character late 20s, maybe around 30, around 30, for to give you a comparison. I actually mathematically worked it out one day, and now I just generally know. Don't ask me to redo the math. I don't like it. So he's spent 50 years figuring out how to control the beast. And that is something incredibly unique about him, is he has learned over the course of 50 years, this did not happen overnight, how to push the feelings of the monster inside at bay, push them down, keep it checked, everything, and to remain himself, to remain Aram, which is kind of impossible, right? But he did it. And that's probably the most special thing about him, is that he has that incredible fortitude within himself to never lose himself to this beast that lives inside of him and constantly claws every second to win and to do violence. So let's talk a little bit more about who Aram is. Now, first I'm going to talk about who he is in the book, because as you know, the characters, this book is based on a role-playing game, or, Dungeons and Dragons. For those of you who don't know, there are lots of other role-playing systems out there. We didn't follow the rule. Anyway, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a nerd. My best friend and I played essentially a Dungeons and Dragons game. This was the story, and I, a couple years later, just decided I'm going to write it down because that was such a great game. And I obviously adapted a lot of it. So first I'd like to talk about who he is in the book and the comparison of that to who he was in the game when we originally played it, because there's a difference. So in the book, Aram is a highly introverted person. That is who he is. He was, I'm sure, since birth, very, very introverted. Not necessarily shy, but you've got to approach him. he's not going to walk away and be upset when someone says hello to him. He will respond and look you in the eye, but he is very, very much a I'm not going to bother you, you don't bother me kind of personality. But he's also a really sweet person. He's actually quite an optimist. And people don't realize that about him a lot because, well, number one, he gives off that instinctual primal thing of like, I'm a werewolf, which is scary, and people feel that on an instinctual level, which is not, you don't think that this person would be positive since he is so introverted. He doesn't walk around, he doesn't smile a lot. He comes off as broody. He really does. Aram, he comes off as a broody guy. He's not really. I mean, he is constantly fighting the good fight inside himself, keeping the wolf in every moment. But in his own head, he's actually, pretty positive thoughts. He's a good person. He's, of course, a loner. At the time, his parents kicked him out, and the way that he learned is he removed himself from society for a very long time because he had the presence of mind to say, I'm not going to hurt people. And that is something that he held to. So he removed himself. He has been a wandering nomad, just a loner for 50 years. I mean, he's pretty lonely, but he weighs that against, okay, the safety of other people versus my need for companionship. I'm going to pick safety of other people. And of course he gets friends in the book because he meets up with the other characters and they go on a quest, but that is not something that he personally sought out. It was something that was, the plot happened and he fell into it. But it is something, he cares about people so much that he's willing to forsake his own emotional needs to make sure that others don't get hurt. He's a very compassionate person. And he only speaks when it matters. He's not necessarily shy, but he also doesn't like frivolous conversation. Social conversation, fine, but he's not going to do small talk with you. That's not Aram. He will only speak when he has something to say or something that he feels is of value. And again, that doesn't mean it's all serious all the time. There can be social conversation going on, and if people are asking him about what his favorite food is, he's going to answer you. He's not going to sit there and stare at you blankly. But it's that sort of thing. He's more of a listener and less of a talker. He listens a lot and he pays attention. And he's also a little unexpectedly funny, which I think is fun. And I enjoyed writing that aspect of his character quite a lot. In the book, he doesn't smile that much, like I said, because he gives off this kind of dark aura. People don't think that this tall, dark, imposing figure is going to toss out a one-liner every once in a while, but he does. And the first couple times he does it, the other characters, they're shocked and they're so happy about it. It's really, it's really fun. One of the other characters actually, but the first time he makes a joke, they go, "Oh my God, you made a joke!" and they call it out, and it's fun. And he's got this deadpan sense of humor. You don't know it's gonna happen, and then he just says something and keeps walking. He'll say it with a straight face, and then the other ones stop and go, "Oh my God, he made a joke," and it's fun, and it really helps to show the softer side of him, outside of the hardened warrior. And I love that about him in the book. And of course he's total badass as well. He just he's a great fighter. He's had to fend for himself and live outside. He didn't even like staying inside of inns or anything like that. Obviously, he'd stopped in towns and things, but he was always just keeping himself away, keeping himself removed. So he's tough. He can take whatever physically. This is in contrast to who he was in the game originally. So in the game, first of all, he was much more broody and pessimistic. He was not an optimist. He's going to be a little broody. He's fighting a monster every second of the day inside of him. But he doesn't allow it to win as much. In the game, maybe it was just more fun to play him darker and crankier. I think that was a big part of it. But he was much less lighthearted. He did not make jokes. He almost never smiled. And he was much, much more cynical. The Aram that we played in the game actually kind of lived in the negative. He would point out the negative outcome and that sort of thing, which, I mean, in real life, I find that very annoying as a personality. It's like if you're always saying, well, this terrible thing could happen. It's like, why do you have to keep talking about the terrible thing? Can we just go get ice cream, please? But he was like that, which is it's kind of fun to play when it's a pretend game and it's not real life. But it is in contrast to his character in the book, because his character in the book is an optimist. He wants to, he will point out the positive conclusion, than the negative one. And you'll see it if you're, when you read it, or if you go back and kind of look through some of his interactions, there are times when he could be pointing out, well, we're going to die or something like that. But he doesn't say that. He says the best outcome every time. When people are saying, oh, we don't know XYZ, he says, nope, we're going to make it, and we're going to find the thing, and it'll be great. And he says that. And I did that on purpose because when I was writing the book, I, of course, had to think more deeply about who he was as a person. When you're playing a game, you're just playing a game. You're not worried about character development so much. But I was thinking, how in the world did this guy who suffered huge trauma, I mean, the act of just getting kicked out of your parents' house, getting kicked out of your own life at the age of 12 or 13 and being disowned completely by your family, that's traumatic enough. But then to have to basically go live in the woods, because he wasn't just kicked out of his house, he was kicked out of the city that he was born and raised in and had probably never left his whole life. He was kicked away from his entire society. He couldn't even go beg on the streets. He was kicked out into the wild. And because, even more, just to pile it on, he was a werewolf. He had become a monster. So people didn't want him around. He very, very probably was going to kill someone. And he realized that as well. So I had to think about it when I was writing him. You couldn't just be funny and be like, well, he's really broody and upset all the time because, werewolf. That's fine when you're just playing a game. When you're writing a book, you have to give readers more than that. And I wanted to. And the way I think that he probably learned to control the wolf within himself and not be that monster that other werewolves become was his optimism. I'm a great believer in that positive thoughts beget positive actions and outcomes. And that negative thoughts beget negative actions and outcomes. And, I believe that's just how the world works. And I personally find that one of the reasons that works is because if you're actually thinking positively about something and about an outcome, you are more prone to work harder for it because you're believing it's going to happen, so you hustle harder to get there, because you already are thinking this is going to happen, so you work harder, and then you create it's self-fulfilling destiny, right? That's how that works. If Aram allowed himself to go into that negative headspace about not remaining Aram and letting the wolf take over, he of course would have ended up like all the other werewolves. And let's face it, that would have been that's a tough task. Who can blame the other werewolves for becoming monsters and murdering and doing all that stuff, because I mean, obviously this is a pretend situation and werewolves aren't real, but these things, how could you even deal with that mentally? But I just thought he's got to be an optimist, because the only way he was able to maintain self, the only way he was able to consistently say, I am me, I am not the wolf, I am me, I am me, I am me, was to be positive about it and to continue to probably have that mantra that I am Aram, I am this person, I am not a monster, and to constantly tell himself in a positive way that he was who he was, and not just homicidal wolf creature. And so that's why I wrote him as an optimist in the book. And also it just gives another nice layer to the character. And I apologize if you can hear the cat meowing on the recording. I don't know if the microphone's picking that up. I can hear it. So that's the differences between him in the game and in the book, which I rather like. And it also plays well off of the character Darien, because in the game, Darien was actually a little more lighthearted. And in the book, Darien is more serious. And I feel that actually worked better, but having two much more serious main characters didn't quite balance well. And I really enjoyed having a slightly warmer Aram. He's still a serious guy, but somebody who's an optimist and has a a soft heart, and a more stoic Darien, somebody who if you listen to the episode about him, episode 5, Darien is a military guy. He's very methodical, he's very strategic, he cares so deeply. That is one of Darien's biggest positives, is that he cares with his whole heart about people and about what he's doing. But because he cares so much, he's a serious guy, because it's serious. He's like, I care about these people beyond everything else. I need to make sure it's okay. I need to be methodical about this and get it right. And that's nice. And Aram is... They play well together, I think, having a few little jokes here and there. And so let's talk a little bit about why we love Aram. And I've already said it, haven't I? One of the things I will say is that a lot of people seem to love Aram. When people read my book and they find me and they ask me about it, and I love it, by the way, when you do that. If you're a reader who has not talked to me about my book, please feel free to reach out anytime via my you can email me via my website, hollisjoemccullumauthor.com, or DM me on Instagram, at hollisjoemccullum. I love to find out, but I am going to ask you who your favorite character was, because I want to know who you relate to most strongly, because that's who your favorite character is. Whoever you relate to most strongly in a book or television show or whatever, that's you find them most relatable to you personally. And Aram is probably the number one answer I get, and I was not anticipating it at all. Ethne's number 2. And I did anticipate people loving Ethne, which, yay! But I don't know why I wasn't anticipating for people to love the introverted, optimistic loner, but they do. And I love it. I love it. So I will say a lot of people love Aram, and I think it is his being so introverted and yet so positive. And also him carrying a lot of emotional weight on his shoulders all the time. I think a lot of people relate to that on a very, very deep level, because we all have baggage that we carry. And, you know, he deals with it in a way that is so stalwart and true and strong. And I think that a lot of people who have heavy bags to carry, you know, emotionally or metaphorically speaking, they maybe find some strength in his character, which was not my intention when I was writing him, but if that's the outcome, I love it. And so that's, yeah, he's very, very, he's very, very relatable. One of the reasons we love him. He's, of course, as I said, he's extremely strong. He's extremely strong. He's physically strong. He's mentally strong, and he's emotionally strong. He is the strongest character in the book, in my personal opinion as the writer, period. Other people, you know, and it's not that he never gets knocked down, you know, he definitely gets knocked down in a few fights, but he always gets back up. He always tries again. And he does so intelligently. He's, all the characters I write are intelligent characters. I like writing them smart. That's how I am. They're probably all, you know, above average intelligence the way I write them, but he's thoughtful, and he's confident in who he is and his capabilities, but he is not cocky. He's the kind of guy that he is aware of his own prowess and abilities, but he is also aware of his own limitations. And he has no qualms about telling you that he has limitations. Doesn't bother him at all. Extremely confident, extremely good to go. And you can absolutely trust him. He is a very trustworthy person, even though he's a werewolf. Because you know he'll be honest with you at all times. And, you know, like, gotta love that. And, of course, he's a genuine optimist. He has to be. To have survived this long and not become a monster, genuine optimist. Aram is the guy who not only will probably be able to carry you out of a bad situation, but will tell you you're going to make it the whole time. And you'll believe him. That's great reason to love someone, right? Now, the reason you might not like Aram so much, there aren't that many, but the glaringly obvious one is that he's a werewolf. And when you take that out of the context of me talking about how strong he is and he fights against it all the time, you think about if you were to actually meet him in real life, you would be encountering a 6'4", dark, tall, I mean, Enrique Iglesias looking very handsome man, but he would have this very, very dark, dangerous energy about him, and he doesn't smile much. He really doesn't. He's probably got some RBF going on. So he's imposing, and he doesn't feel right. Like I said at the beginning, animals don't like him because to an animal, he doesn't smell like your everyday elf. They smell wolf. They smell predator. They smell danger. And they know that they say, I need to get away from this. I'm going to die. And as human beings and, you know, people in the world, you can sense that in another person. You know, when a stranger walks into a room that has that kind of very dangerous energy, you feel it. You don't know a thing about them. But when you are standing next to that person, a lot of the time, and you're feeling that negative, scary energy of somebody that could really do some serious damage to you, that's frightening. And that's a big negative for him. He is he is always anxious himself. A little, he's always, and that's one of the reasons he's so introverted, is because he is anxious in social situations, because he is extremely self-aware and extremely knowledgeable that he could, he really could be putting out those vibes, and that people sense it, they feel it, the pheromones are there, they can smell it on a, on a pheromonal kind of level. He comes off as very dangerous because he actually is. If he ever lost control, hugely dangerous. Thankfully, he continues to be strong and all of that, but that is his biggest negative. That, and he's, because he's an introvert, some people might say that's a huge negative too. In the book, being introverted is not at all a problem. He does not want to take charge, but no problem there, because there are basically the other three characters, one in particular, Darian in particular, who is used to being in charge. They do it. They'll just step forward and they'll make and Aram is happy to be part of the process of making decisions, but he doesn't want to be the person who has the final word. He doesn't want to be the person that is the figurehead and the speaker for the group. No. He will back up into the background and stand last in line for all of that. He is absolutely not the guy who wants to be in charge, and he will avoid that position like the plague. And that's really honestly, in my head, really the only two big negatives I can think of with him, because he is so self-possessed and in amazing control of himself. He does not have a temper. I mean, not to say that he doesn't get annoyed or upset or whatever, but he's very, very cool all the time. He's super level-headed, and he's one of those people that he won't even raise his voice at you. He'll walk away from you if he needs to, but won't even raise his voice. He will walk away before anything heated happens. He will not allow himself to become emotionally compromised because he can't afford to. Because he's fighting a battle every second of the day, and every second of his life, he's fighting a battle against a monster that lives inside of him. And he can't waste his energy on fighting with others, especially over frivolous things. So he doesn't get into fights, which is cool. And again, probably why people love him so much. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Once again, To Save a World is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever books are sold if you want to order it. And it's, I think, a great fantasy adventure novel. I've got 4.7 stars on Amazon and 4.8 stars on Goodreads for it, so feeling confident. And if you read it, or if you've already read it, the sequel's coming out. I'm entitling it The Queen Witch, is coming out early next year, hopefully sometime February, March, if I continue to stay on track with my writing process. And yay, I'm very excited. Please feel free to reach out to me over my social medias. My YouTube channel is Hollis Jo McCullum, author. And this podcast is on Spotify, the name of this podcast, which you're listening to it, so, probably know it's called I Do What I Want. But I just said it anyway. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful time, and I bid you all good night. Good day.